Well, there's no easy way to say this, but that was definitely the most boring race so far we've had in 2025. Hello everyone, hope you're having a great day. Of course, today we'll be reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix. It'll probably be a short video because there was definitely not much to review. That race was incredibly boring, not much racing, but that happens sometimes. You get bad races. Tracks, even as great as Suzuka, usually aren't that great for the modern F1 cars. Blame it on the cars, don't blame it on the track, but let's get straight into this. And this race was basically won with Verstappen's pole lap on Saturday. A great lap. He didn't have the fastest sectors in his lap, but he was the most consistent. And whilst Norris went purple in Sector 1, Piastri was purple in Sector 2 and Sector 3. Verstappen was the only driver who was able to put it all together, and hence he started on pole. And as long as he led into Turn 1, which he managed to do with a great getaway ahead of Norris and Piastri, he basically had this race sewed up as long as he was able to keep his track position, just because overtaking around Suzuka is so hard with the one DRS zone. Again, not much really happened until we had the first pit stop cycle. There wasn't much tyre wear. The resurfacing had meant that the tyres were taking less punishment through the S's, so everyone knew it was going to be a one-stop going in, and this is where we had our first bit of incidents, I suppose. Piastri pitted one lap earlier than both Norris and Verstappen, but he was a bit far enough back to perform an undercut. And then Verstappen and Norris pitted on the same lap, which I will question from McLaren. I think they should have split their strategies a bit more. Obviously, hindsight is beneficial here. In the moment, they were just trying to go on the best strategy and use their tyre pace to their advantage and race pace to their advantage. But I wish they had split the strategies a bit more and made Verstappen choose which car he wanted to cover, because they were still covered by around 4 or 5 seconds at this stage. Anyway, Norris and Verstappen came into the pit. The McLaren pit crew did a really quick stop and was able to get Norris nearly out alongside Verstappen. And then on the pit exit, Verstappen and Norris were running kind of side by side. Norris was a bit further back and Norris just ended up going onto the grass here. There's really only space for one car going out onto the racetrack here. And you can't blame this on Norris, you can't blame this on Verstappen. Definitely not Verstappen's fault at all. He has to stay between the white lines. And Norris, I think, just needed to concede this position. He wasn't far enough alongside to warrant the space that Verstappen would have had to give him in the process. And I think, if anything, McLaren should have held him a little to make sure he got out behind Verstappen at this stage. But yeah, Norris just should have slotted in behind Verstappen, not Verstappen's fault at all. And I'm happy the stewards did not get involved. After this, it was basically just a straight race to the end, who had the best pace and who was going to be able to overtake. Piastri was probably the quickest of the top three, but he was stuck behind Norris, who was stuck behind Verstappen. So Piastri was probably quickest, then Norris, then Verstappen. But the pace difference between those top three was so minimal, they were never going to be able to actually overtake each other, because it looked great. They were covered by such a small gap. But because they were covered by such a small gap, because they were so similar in pace, no one was ever going to be able to overtake without a mistake being made from the driver in front, which none of the drivers did end up doing. Verstappen managed to hold on basically for the rest of the race here, holding off Norris, who was ahead of Piastri. As I said earlier, I do think McLaren should have swapped the drivers just to see, and obviously if Piastri doesn't get past Verstappen, he gives the place back to Norris. But I understand why they didn't do it. It's hard to say to a driver, you've got to swap with your teammate, given Norris was only a second or so behind Verstappen. So if Verstappen makes a mistake, Norris is going to be in a prime position to capitalize. So I understand why they didn't make the decision. I would have preferred to see them make a swap just to try it out and see if they could actually get past Verstappen. So yeah, Verstappen ends up winning the Grand Prix. It was a great drive from him, very impressive considering just how bad the Red Bull has been for basically the start of this season. This car was definitely not the quickest car there today. It was 100% the McLarens. They should have won this race. But yeah, the race was a real snooze fest, even though the top three finished close together. Not much really happened throughout the rest of the running order, I suppose. There was a lot of drivers struggling with their brakes, locking up going into the final corner. But again, not much apart from that. Albon was complaining about his upshifts. Verstappen was complaining about his upshifts. But yeah, really not much interesting going on throughout the lower bit of the field. Hamilton and Kimi Antonelli tried to run a different strategy, going much longer on the first stint and then swapping to softer tyres and having a much shorter second stint. However, this didn't really pay off. They didn't make up any ground in terms of overtaking or positions. They didn't nearly catch up to Russell, but again, they didn't get past or get close enough to even attempt an overtake. So the strategy was very clear. It was a one-stop and you had to pit around lap 20 or so. Let's just talk about the Red Bull and their driver stable quickly. Hadjar actually had a superb drive to finish in the points. It was a very good drive from him, very solid considering the seatbelt issues he was struggling with in qualifying. Lawson was down in 17th and Yuki was only down in 12th. Of course, Yuki's pace just disappeared as the course of the weekend went on. He ended up getting out-qualified by both Racing Bulls, which was very disappointing. He did have a better race, but again, he needs to be finishing in the points. And Lawson, I think, just got the short end of the straw with the strategy, helping out Hadjar to make sure he got in the points. But he wouldn't have got the short end of the straw if he out-qualified Hadjar in qualifying, so he's got no one but himself to blame there, really. In terms of other drivers, Albon and Behrman finished out the points-paying positions, so great solid drives from them. Didn't really see them much on the TV broadcast at all. I actually can't really remember what we saw on the TV broadcast apart from the top three just driving around. We saw a little bit of Yuki, of course, because it was his home race, but yeah, not a very interesting race. A little fun fact of the day is that this is the first non-street race where the top six have finished in the exact same position of which they started the race, which again just highlights how boring this race was. But again, this is not a call to get rid of Suzuka. You have to put this on the cars and their width and their inability to follow at the moment. So hopefully racing here improves in the 2026 regulations, and I would actually like to see them add 2 more DRS zones. I would like to see them add it into 130R and make the drivers manually switch it off, because that's what they have to do for turn 1, and maybe also into spoon curve you could get some DRS, which would just help the cars stay closer together. Overall though, this race I'm gonna have to give a 5 out of 10 really, maybe a 4 out of 10. It was average or just slightly below average, and I'm very much looking forward to Bahrain next week. Bahrain is a good track, I very much enjoy it, and hopefully the racing will be a lot better. But let me know what you guys would rate the race out of 10 down below, and your thoughts about Suzuka. If the cars need to change, if you think there should be more DRS zones, please leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next week.